I think that if we're talking about the coming year, we should be very cautious about a number of different things. If I'm to give a few predictions about what's going to happen going into 2026, Mark referenced governance. And I think this is going to become a much bigger thing, especially around the application of artificial intelligence. We know that the European Union has got some fairly stringent regulations that are coming into play. We also know that there's a lot of other jurisdictions that are probably going to mirror that type of a playbook and that are going to try and bring in their own legislation as it relates to the use of AI and how AI needs to be governed. So I personally would recommend anybody who is playing in technology to think about the regulation. What were some of the lessons that I think Mark will agree with me? What were some of the lessons that were learned with GDPR, where people chose to almost pretend it wasn't going to happen, to ignore it and so forth. And then it did happen, and there were a lot of implications. Think about how regulation around AI is going to be brought in, whether it's the EU, whether it's different states in the United States, whether it's Canada, Australia, New Zealand, some of the APAC countries. This is going to be a reality as there needs to be efforts to try and, I think, clamp down on some of the, say, the examples like Mark referenced around the toy industry. That's just one of many.
Yeah,
Second thing
yeah.
I would
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just gonna echo that as well, and just say that we've seen GDPR come in a few years ago to try and enforce some sort of data protection, but now we're sort of seeing AI turbocharge what you can do with customer data in particular, and so this is giving brands insight into customer behavior in a way that we've never seen before, and so I think that we're gonna very quickly see that kind of uncanny valley where you're engaging with a company and they have every piece of information on you. They know exactly when you buy, what you don't like, what you like, and they will be pinging offers at you that they will argue they have been designed to be exactly what you want at the moment that you want them. But I'm sure that we will find that a lot of people find it very intrusive, and find that it's quite disturbing that you were just having a conversation with your partner about buying a new table and chair set, and suddenly your phone pings with a message saying, "Are you interested in this table and chairs from IKEA, for example?" So that's the sort of thing we're going to see, because people will be applying AI models to create greater insight, and how that applies to the existing GDPR that we designed nearly a decade ago is going to be one of the big governance problems we see now.
100% agree. Something else I would predict for next year, Irina, from the standpoint of buyers of technology is we can all agree that the past 3 years there's been a tremendous hype cycle around AI. Mark and I talk frequently about how LinkedIn is almost polluted with the hype cycle, which is not constructive for anybody. It's not constructive for developers, for buyers, for people who observe the market. But one of the things that we're starting to see right now, and I think will be very big next year, is the buying community pushing back on the nebulous discussion, pushing back on the hype cycle elements, and starting to ask the providers, ask the technology companies for real use cases. They can talk all they want about what this technology can do and how it can be applied. But there's going to be I think a demand for case studies. There's going to be a desire for organizations providing technology to be able to come to the table and say, this is what we've done in this specific vertical market. This is how we've already helped a particular organization using AI technology. The reality is we all know that budgets when it comes to investing in technology and investing in services are tight. The economic and geopolitical situation is not conducive right now to a tremendous amount of spend. And that money that's going to be spent, I think, will be done much more in a judicious way. And the providers of technology are going to need to get specific if they're going to be able to be successful.
Yeah, I would say that you could even label this as pragmatic AI. If you wanted to sort of create a label for this, since ChatGPT launched, which was 3 years ago at the end of 2022, we've seen this kind of explosion in interest in generative AI. And that's kind of led into the interest in agentic. Agentic is still being mainly experimented with. That there are some good examples of real use cases, but most of the time it's pilots that people are talking about. But with generative AI, it is a little bit more mature. But the problem has been that the hype cycle, people talking about what this can do in terms of replacing people and replacing jobs. And Peter and I both do a lot of work on customer experience. So looking at how brands interact with customers. And for the last couple of years, the focus of AI use has been, how can we get rid of all these agents? We've got all these people talking to customers. How can we replace these people and do their job using AI? And yet, what's clearly become, very clear this year is a much better use is to do with productivity and improving quality and improving the service rather than replacing people. You're making people do a more effective job using the AI technology. And so, that's really the message that we found is there's a lot more pragmatism coming into the use of AI this year. And I think that we will see that. We will see a pushback on the pilots that don't have a clear path to enterprise scale. So again, instead of just saying, here's a great idea, let's roll out this pilot and see whether this flies, there will be much more of a pushback to say, look, if we don't have a clear pathway to how this can help the enterprise, then we're not going to keep on funding all these pilots, because it's easy enough to show that we can do something on a small scale, but to make that work at the enterprise level normally needs a fundamental change in the way the data is organized within the organization, and that's a big investment in itself. So yeah, I think that as Peter was outlining, there's going to be a continued use of AI and a lot of depth in the projects that get rolled out, but they're going to be more focused on actually delivering rather than just innovation and experimentation.
Yeah, and something else I'll say, Irina, you'll appreciate this from a marketing standpoint. And I think a lot of the viewers of this video will too, is the fact that we do understand now, as Mark said, that it's been 3 years since the ChatGPT revolution started. The reality is, I think, in a lot of technology tools, AI has been inserted, it's been deployed, it's part of what are in the inner workings of different solution sets. And I also think that to that end, a lot of organizations that are providing these tools around technology are going to need to start thinking about the fact that AI is going to be just almost an accepted part of what goes into the process, what goes into the outcomes themselves. And it's not really going to be that much of a selling point. It almost reminds me, and I keep using this example, so forgive me for being repetitive, but it's like when computers started implementing in the mid to late 90s Pentium processors. For a couple of years, it was important for a computer company to say that they had laptops and desktops that were Pentium enabled. But after a while, the customer, the client, just comes to accept the fact that this is exactly what you're going to be coming to the table with, that this is no longer a point of differentiation. It's just something that you have to have. And I think that for a lot of these different technology tools, continually focusing on AI enablement is going to probably run out of runway, or it's going to hit an expiry date very soon. Because if you don't have it, that's going to be the big issue. And I think any technology firm providing any type of a solution will understand that they need to have this AI running in the background as part of the process. Because if they don't, they're just not going to be under consideration. But the key is to talk, and this is where I'm going with this, in technology, focusing on the outcomes as opposed to what goes into the sausage. It's like you're going into a restaurant, you're ordering some sausage. All you care about is it going to taste good? Am I going to be satisfied? That's going to be the best outcome. You don't care what goes into it. You care about what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, and this comes down to this question also of whether we are overspending on the AI research at the moment. And because at the end of the day, what most people in most organizations are concerned about is exactly as Peter was suggesting. What's the business solution? What is our business going to get out of this, and how are we going to apply AI into the mix to improve what we are offering to our customers? Most people don't care about the software that's being used inside a company. They just want great service from that company. Whatever you're buying from them, you want it to be faster, better, cheaper, and that's the thing. And I think that's a problem for some of the pure play AI organizations. I mean, if you are OpenAI or Anthropic, or even Meta. And you're designing these AI solutions, and you're trying to get people to pay $200 or $300 a month to access this software. Who's going to keep on paying that? Because eventually, you're going to be like Microsoft, for example, just bundling it into all of your existing products. I'm not going to pay Microsoft more because Excel has got some sort of AI functionality built into it. I'm just going to start expecting that. And so I do think that's going to be an important factor. And we're going to see this played out across all industries. We will start expecting when we engage with an e-commerce site for that organization to know more about our preferences, because they're just using AI on the back end. So definitely there will be a sort of a soft acceptance of this technology. Again, that could be problematic if the only thing you're selling is an AI solution.
AI is everywhere. It's permeating a lot of what we're doing in technology. But you are right to call out other possible technology elements that we should be looking at. Look, I'll go back to what we were saying earlier around cybersecurity. The extent to which information security and the extent to which locking down data and information, I don't think has ever been as important as it is now. There's almost no week goes by without some high profile hack having been done, some type of a data breach, whether it's an organization in the private sector or the government. But I would say, Irina, that from my angle, based on the research I'm doing with enterprises right now, this is effectively very much top of mind in the C-suite, and in terms of office compliance officers, in terms of individuals who are responsible for security when it comes to making certain that organizational data and consumer data is going to be as watertight as possible.
I would go back then and say, because the problem is that AI cuts across everything. If we're talking about automation, cybersecurity, agentic, we could just abbreviate it and just say, well, AI is changing everything. But I think that one of the things that may be more important going forward is the way that it will change the infrastructure, the corporate and enterprise infrastructure. Because as we found, you can take, let's say, a sales or a CRM system and apply some AI to that. You can get more insight on your potential customers, for example. But then when you want to scale that up and go across the entire enterprise and integrate that pilot into the rest of your business, it becomes very difficult. And I think that this is because we're used to this kind of hierarchy or construction of organizations where everything is siloed into departments. You've got human resources, IT, sales, marketing, and all these other functions. And quite often, traditionally, they've all had their own systems, their own data sets. They don't really communicate all that well. People have applied ERP and CRM to try and cut across all these departments. But the problem comes when you really seriously try to introduce tools like Agentic, then you need everything within your organization to be able to share information. And the dream that we have, that we talk about, I should be able to go to my phone and say, hey, Siri, can you book me on a flight to Paris tomorrow using Expedia, and don't pay more than $1,000, and just let it go away and fix that problem. But clearly there's so many levels to that, in that it needs permission to access my bank details, my payment details. It needs permission to go away and know my preferences around which airlines I prefer to use, or which hotel I prefer to stay at. And then even within, if it's going to Expedia, it needs to be able to exchange lots of information that's then going to go within that organization as well. So for a lot of this stuff to really work, we need to change the way that most organizations are designed. And so we need to create a data layer that cuts across the entire organization. And I think that actually that's going to be possibly one of the biggest changes that we need to see in 2026. And that will be one of the biggest blockers for many people who say, where you have the chief executive saying, right, we need to roll out an agentic solution. And the CIO will come back and say, well, yeah, we need to spend a couple of million improving how our data is organized first, because otherwise we can't do it. And so, it doesn't sound as sexy as saying, oh, we're just going to automate everything with AI. We need to improve our governance and our data layer first. But I think that unfortunately that's going to be a hard reality for most companies. I would throw in just one extra thing quickly then as well, and that is physical technology. I think that we're increasingly seeing automated vehicles being rolled out and becoming commonplace. So it's already commonplace. Places like Texas, California, they're being rolled out in 26 in London, in the UK. So to see automated taxis, to see automated delivery robots now becoming normal, and just to be normalized, whereas 5-10 years ago, this was stuff that you might see in Black Mirror. This was science fiction. And I think that this is going to be an important change, because we will look a decade from now, when all of this stuff is entirely automated and normalized. And if you call for a food delivery and it comes by robot, a few years ago that did seem like science fiction. I do think that in the next couple of years, all of this stuff will become normalized. And of course, a lot of that's driven by AI, but it's AI within physical systems that are being used for deliveries or for autonomous vehicles. And so I think that is going to become a big trend.
I wouldn't disagree with that. And as somebody who was recently in San Francisco and saw the number of autonomous cars on the road, and I actually tried one, this is here. Like, I mean, it's not going away, and it's only going to get bigger. Mark referenced deliveries. Mark talked a little bit about how this is changing the game in regards to how maybe we're receiving a food delivery or a package from an e-commerce provider. We just have to get ready for it, because this is definitely something that is, I would say, on the cusp of becoming extremely mainstream. 2026 might be the year.